Hey guys, this is Allan, and I just want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. I have a podcast called The Lounge that I would love for you to subscribe to, interact with me. I'd love to hear from you and what you think of the podcasts that are coming up. And this channel is going to be dedicated to worship, to the podcast, and to some interesting interviews and exciting content. So please stay tuned and connect with me. Thank you. Hey guys, so today's podcast is a very special podcast. A lot of you guys on my Instagram poll a week ago, when I asked what everyone would like to hear on the podcast, a lot of people responded and said they'd want to see my wife, Taryn. So today, her and I are going to have a conversation about life, about our testimony specifically, and what God has done in our lives. So I just want to welcome Taryn. Taryn, welcome, my love.
Thank you for welcoming me on the lounge. Thank you, everyone, for requesting that I be here.
You're famous. You're famous.
Famous girl.
So a lot of you asked to share about our testimonies. And I think it was something that Taryn and I had to think about. Do we want to share our full testimonies on a podcast, or do we want to share certain aspects of our testimony to encourage, to give people faith, to give people hope? And we both decided that we would want to share a portion or share a bit of what God has done in our lives. So for me, people asked where I came from and how did I get to where I am today with the Lord? How did I get saved? What is my testimony? What did God do in my life? So most of the people on this podcast, or new people, won't know, or people that I don't have a relationship won't know that I was born 2 months premature. I'm looking at Taryn.
27
was
weeks.
there. So I was born, you see, she knows the exact weeks. I was born at 27 weeks, which was 2 months premature, and my lungs weren't developed. So I couldn't breathe properly. So for the first few months of my life, I actually was in hospital. And there's a crazy testimony with regards to the first phases of my life, or let me say when I was born in the first few months of my life. My mom was in hospital, obviously, gave birth to me. And the oxygen that was given to me pierced holes into my lungs. And there was a stage where I was small, that when I was a baby, that the doctor said to my mom that you have to prepare that your son is going to die. We don't see cases like this where the babies survive because of the severity of them being ill, their lungs not being developed. And they literally said to my mom, you can go home, just prepare that he's not going to make it through some nights. And my dad obviously was at the hospital and had to go through many nights thinking that I'm not going to make it because I was on machines. There were times that I got infection or I got sick. And the doctor said to my mom one night, just leave everything now, go home and leave it in God's hands. And I think what people seldom forget is that when you do leave something in the Lord's hands, that he's in control of it and he works everything out for the better good.
And then his hand is in it.
Yes. So what had happened is my mom obviously went home and she prayed. We have an aunt that is in New Zealand. Her name is Helen. So Helen, if you are on here today and you're watching, I just want to say thank God again for your life and for you praying, for going to those revival meetings that I'm going to speak about now. So my aunt, or my mom's aunt, Helen, who is in New Zealand, she in the beginning of that week, I think, or the month, I don't know the exact details, or the first 2 weeks of my life, she went to a meeting or a revival service where there was an evangelist, and I can't remember his name, of the minister. And she went to the service, and there was twice that she went to 2 different meetings in that week. And the first service she went knowing that, the Lord said to the doctor said to my mom that you need to give your son into the Lord's hands because he's not really going to make it. And she went forward in faith saying, God, you need to do something for this young boy. So what had happened is she went and no one knew who I was. The minister didn't know who I was. There were hundreds of people at the service. And this minister called her forward. And he said to her, you need to go back. There's a boy that you're standing in faith for. And you need to go back and tell the parents of the boy that the boy will live. And she was so blown away that this person didn't even know who she actually was. And that she heard from God that I'm going to survive. She obviously went back. She told my mom and my parents that I was going to live and that she had received a word from God. And I think back then, my parents didn't really know what a word from God was or what a prophecy was or taking men and women of God legit because they never grew up charismatic. And what had happened is, I think a week or two later, she went to another revival meeting with a different minister. This minister then called her forward and said, you are praying for someone, and you need to go back and you need to tell this person that you're praying for, which was me, that person that you're praying for will serve God all the days of his life, and his future or her future will be of serving God for the rest of their lives. And she said at that time, the only person she went forward for in her heart was for me, because I wasn't really coming out of the state of being healthy and my lungs weren't getting better. So the testimony that I have with that is years later, she's 20 years later, I think, Taryn and I were going through such a difficult time. And I just remember driving in the car one day. I had this old City Golf or Velocity Golf. I think I was 21 or 22. And I was driving and I just said to the Lord, Lord, do you see me?
No, it was younger than that, because we started hanging out.
It was before we were married, eh?
Yes.
And I remember driving and I was just like, Lord, what's happening with my life? Things are going wrong. There's just certain things I'm not happy with. Like, do you see me? So what had happened, those of you that don't know, my parents had a fish and chip shop, typical Portuguese family business. And I went to the shop that specific day to go and pick something up for my mom or do something. And my mom said, are you expecting post from anyone? Because at that time, seems like we're in the Stone Age. But at that time...
Yes, back in the day, you actually got things with a stamp on.
Back in the day,
we wrote emails with a pen.
Listen, we're not that old. I mean, we're in our 30s, guys. That's not old.
I'm not that old.
No. Yes. Well, you're turning 40, so I mean... But anyway, so I remember going to my mom. She asked me about this post and she said to me, are you waiting to receive something? I said, no. Who would I get post from? And she said, because it's weird, it's got a stamp on that comes from another country, New Zealand or Australia or whatever. She didn't know at the time. And then I obviously saw it was New Zealand, and it was a letter from Helen. And what are the chances that on that day, me speaking to the Lord and saying to the Lord, like, do you see me? That on that same day, I would get a post from New Zealand speaking about this very testimony that I've just spoken to you about. It's amazing how God does things when you least expect it, but also when you really, really need it.
Just talking from my perspective, it's the day that, Allan wasn't a very extremely emotional person. I'm not saying that men must go out and cry, but he phoned me sobbing and I thought someone had died. And we were just kind of dating. And we'll talk more about how we got together, I'm sure. Before that, he was so madly in love with me already. Okay, jokes aside. But he said to me, I just need you to listen. I just got a letter. And he read the letter to me. And I think you still have the letter somewhere. And he read the letter out about how the letter was actually just saying that the boy will live. And, Allan didn't come from a charismatic family or a family. They were in a different denomination that, served God, but just differently. And I didn't believe the things and the way and in salvation and kind of that type of thing. But this aunt did. And she truly believed. But it was something that sparked Allan and gave us, it was always like Allan always knew the struggles he had because he was always sick. As a little boy, he never really had a childhood. I always called him, he had a bubble boy childhood because he was always just actually busy dying until he was in we would call grade 7. It was standard 5 to us back then. And I never even knew that until his sister had spoken to me. But in this letter, the aunt was just explaining about how both men had just said to that the boy will live and serve the Lord all the days of his life. But it also spoke about a shepherd. And Allan being a shepherd. So it was just such an amazing moment. And I feel like something was birthed in that moment of you getting that letter and just believing, oh, wow, this is actually the truth. He always knew that he was sick. He always knew that as a little boy, it was a struggle for him. But it was that moment that you realized your testimony was the very breath that was being stolen from you is a very breath that you would be used for God.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful things that I always speak about when people interview me is I say, the very thing that I was called for the enemy tried to abort in an infant stage. And that's just also something that you also take into your relationship with the Lord, is that the enemy tries to discourage, to try and abort you while you're still in incubation.
Yes.
And we sometimes forget that.
I think that, we forget the miraculous, but we also forget that about faith. I know a lot of people don't always believe in the signs and miracles now these days, but I've just seen too many things. I've just seen even your walk with how your very breath and the songs and everything that you put out becomes a success because God is behind it, and where you've always put your will to do God's will. You've always, that's something that I've always admired about Allan, is that you've always wanted to do God's perfect will, and maybe that made you tarry at certain times and procrastinate in doing certain things, but you always wanted the will and to use what you had to do something for God. And that was always something that I respected, because at times, his lungs to this day still give him a bit of trouble, and people then would question, okay, but where's the sign and miracle behind that? The sign and miracle is the faith that he carries on to do that. And, in the Bible, it talks about where Jesus knows how fickle people are. And I think it is in John 2, and it speaks about how many people came to salvation with the signs and miracles that Jesus was performing. But it speaks about how Jesus knew how fickle people are and how they were coming because of signs and miracle, but not really through faith.
Yeah.
And the thing that's so important with Allan's story to me as a wife is watching him have the faith to carry on, even in those moments. And I don't think, obviously, as a teenager, he wasn't always saved. He was obviously, everyone has gone through and has more of a testimony. And he was obviously a lot naughtier than people. But that's not the testimony. The testimony to me is not even that you were so sick, but your testimony is that you, as me as a wife, is to watch how no matter what's come, it can be sickness, it can be knock, it can be your own mistakes. You've always had the faith to go, okay, God, I'm just going to do this for you, no matter what it is. You can take everything from me. And there's been times where we've had nothing. But you still believed. Allan has like this childlike faith to just always believe. And it was never always about this massive sign and miracle. Although we as believers, Allan and I, we do believe in the signs and miracles of God. We do believe in healing. We do believe in God doing things. And I know some people question, like, why hasn't Allan been healed? But he has. And, the enemy always wants to take that very testimony and make it a lie. And it's not a lie. It's not a lie, because the healing has always been there.
Yeah.
And it is there.
Yeah.
The testimony is that you're still walking in faith, because faith pleases God.
Yeah. I think if people really know the severity of my lungs, you would understand that even me today, sitting here talking and breathing,
yes,
is a miracle. So it's an honor for me to be able to do the very thing that the enemy tried to rob me of, and do it today.
And actually sound good.
Yeah. Thank you, babe.
Well, I just want everyone to know that you can put this on record. I told him everything he knows.
No, you did. But what I want to say today is that besides for that being a testimony because of you guys asking, I could point many things that I've gone through over the last, up until even me getting saved, that I went through, from rejection. I think we all have a similar walk of life where it's the usual things: rejection, loneliness, you name it. I mean, some people have severe stories. Some people have been abused. We obviously have the opportunity of really walking with people and counseling people, because obviously we're in full-time ministry at Encounter Church. And we have the opportunity of walking a road with people. And what you hear people have gone through is actually hectic. Our testimonies, we do have hectic things that have happened. I was an alcoholic before I got saved. And the miraculous thing about that as well is that I drank from probably when I was 14 years old up until I was 19 or 18. And I got really drunk to the point where Taryn would know that I would black out at events and parties or at a bar, and I would literally black out. I would sleep on the concrete. I would black out on the concrete next to the car. So we have many stories like that we can tell. But I think with regards to the alcohol side for me is that it was very severe. Addiction was a very hectic thing in my life. I remember clearly there was one night that I went out and I just got my license, probably two days before. It was like a Wednesday I got my license. The Friday I went out and I went to a place called Stones in Ramsig. And Ramsig, for the international people, is a place in Johannesburg where people would go and drink and play pool. And I remember getting drunk and I was driving home. And I remember driving up a road, Doreen Road, and I was drunk and I could feel that I was out of it. And it was as if I heard the Lord say to me that this is it. And to give you a background is before me getting saved, my sister, who I know Jen, you're going to be watching, who I honor her for her faith because my sister prayed. Yes. She prayed for me. I mean, Taryn knew my sister as well when we first got saved. I remember I would be in our house. Today. Yeah, you obviously still know my sister today. She lives in Ireland. And I remember when my sister first got saved, I always joke and I say to people, coming from a Catholic background to a Pentecostal background, and then hearing my sister praying in the room. She paved the way. She really did pave the way. And praying in the room, and she would pray, and she would be praying in tongues. And I remember going to the door and being like, I said to my mom, Lord, this is not normal. This is evil. This isn't right. Because I didn't understand. I never had revelation. I never knew God. And I remember being so disturbed that this was so real for her because I'd never experienced it. And little did I know that going with her to church services, my previous church where I come from, I would often put my hand up for the altar call because I would be sitting there with a hangover. Thinking, Lord, maybe me putting my hand up is going to save me from feeling this terrible hangover. But little did I know that was seeds that she was planting, and she was taking me to this church service, these services every single week or every month. I can't remember exactly how often I went, but there was a defining moment that happened for me. For the people that asked about my testimony, this is why I believe in the power of home groups or e-groups or home cells or connect groups, is that I remember sitting in a home cell and the people around me were crying and worship was on. And that's where I think worship really became real to me, because I realized this is music that these people are playing and it's doing something to them. And I don't understand why. And I sat and I looked around and these people were crying. And in a moment, it was as if the presence of God came over me and I burst into tears. And while I was crying, my e-group leader or my cell group leader came to me and she sat next to me. And as I looked at her, it was as if I was word vomiting everything that I had to confess that the Lord wanted me to speak. And I remember confessing and just asking God for forgiveness. And I just remember being so overwhelmed by the presence of God and feeling love that night it transformed my life. I remember going home and I ripped all these posters off of my wall of semi-naked people and going into my cupboard where I had letters and stuff and memorabilia and even slight borderline witchcraft stuff that I had in my room. And I remember that next morning I woke up and I burnt every single thing that I had. And from that day in 2006, that's when my life really transformed. For some people, it is a process and it's normal. Some people do have a process with the Lord where it's as if they go through a cleaning process. And some people have such a dynamic change that their lives change immediately right there and then on the spot. Yeah. And that's what happened with me. Yes. But for those that are listening today, don't be discouraged if you are in a place where you are in that process of being cleaned. Because not everyone is radically changed at that moment like that. And we've seen over the years, 20 years of knowing people or walking a road with people, we've seen there's even still people that we have in our lives today that we're walking a road with, that it's a process that they go on. And the one powerful thing that I always say to people is Jesus never said, come when you are perfect. Yeah. He said, come as you are, and he changes you. And that's my testimony. And I've been serving God ever since then, 2006 till today. It's almost 20 years later. Yep. And Taryn and I have been serving God. Taryn was in the church world a year before me, actually. A year and a bit. So we also have a powerful testimony on the way we actually bumped into each other. And before Taryn speaks and gives her testimony, I just want to say that there's actually such significant moments that are real, even when you're not serving God. And I believe it's like a spiritual like a spiritual moment where God shows you a part of your future at a moment that you actually don't deserve to be shown.
Yes.
And I remember in Stones, Taryn and I met actually
Before
in
we
Stones,
were both saved.
before we were both saved. And I remember still to this day, she was shocked the other day when I told her, you were wearing a black skirt, you were wearing a white shirt, you were wearing black heels. And I remember at that moment, as drunk as what I was, I saw Taryn, and it was as if God allowed me to see that that was my future. And at that moment, we didn't even speak. We didn't even know each other. I spoke to her one friend, and we didn't know each other. There was no connection whatsoever. But I remember so clearly that day, that evening, being as drunk as what I was, that there was something that was standing in front of me that was actually a part of my future. So Taryn, tell us about your testimony.
I sat thinking, and when I heard that people actually wanted me on part of the podcast, I was like, it's so strange to me that people want to hear what I've got to say. Especially that people requested to hear what I've got to say and what our testimony is, because I've never considered myself like something incredibly special or anything. Not that I'm putting myself down. I think I'm great to me, but I don't know if I'll be great to everyone. I'm satisfied with that, So to me, I came out of a family of divorce. When I was 13 months old, my parents were already divorced. And so I never knew a home as whole. And, looking back now, I realized the toiling and stuff that had been put into my life to try and get me and to try and make things okay. But, as unfortunately as life goes by, it's a bit more difficult for me to put my life in and say, I didn't have, I wasn't born premature or got sick, but I did come out of a home that was broken. And I came out of a home that, at the time I was sort of rejected because I was a child that thought, they would keep the marriage together, and it kind of didn't. But it's not to say I didn't have a family that didn't love me. I've got two incredible parents that I am truly grateful. As an adult that sits with two children right now, I'm very blessed to say that I understand more now. But as a kid, I didn't. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but my mother had got remarried and got together with a man that had a lot of I can't say I want to say he's an evil man now. I would like to say that he was a very broken man. And he unfortunately abused my sister and I. And, more than the sexual abuse, it was hard because he was a very incredibly hard man. And he, for some reason, he was very intense. And I think I realized, as an adult and going through what I've gone, the healing and stuff that I've gone through now, is that I can honestly say that I know most people don't look at me and know the pain that I've felt in my life. And I've always said to God, when I first got saved, I used to share my testimony in detail with everybody. And I stopped doing that the moment I went into God, because someone really hurt me, and actually went to speak to Allan. And they really, after I'd spoken to my testimony, but out of ignorance, and I had no wisdom at that stage, and they tried to discourage Allan from marrying me or being with me because of all things that had happened to me. But this person didn't realize the healing that I had too. And that's one thing I can turn and say is that, I don't want to make everything a Christian bubble. And I don't want to make everything become a Christian, and we'll bake cookies together and we'll go out and slap people with the Bible. Yeah. I want to actually give people a hope, and that there is just something so much more than us just being Bible bashers and just, we're going and we're just singing a song. There's just so much more beauty than that. But we get the privilege of worshiping together. We get the privilege of having signs and miracles. But, my testimony comes from, I was a lost little girl with no hope and, feeling very alone and almost abandoned. Where you see me with my parents now, and I had the privilege of having a good relationship, particularly close to my mother. And now I look at my life and think, sure, I didn't understand the unconditional love that she had for me at the time. But I had blamed my mom for a lot because I felt that she should have been protecting me. And little did I know, as an adult, she wasn't seeing everything, and it wasn't her fault. But at the time, I had blamed her for all the abuse, all the intensity. I came out of a household that there was a lot of fear. and so many things happened, and hidings and stuff, and abuse that shouldn't have been there. But at the time, it was made to look normal, and this was a normal thing. And I'm so grateful for it now, because I look and I can say that this is why a mess can always become a message, and a test can always become a testimony. And that's why, it's not like God's will for me to have been hurt, but it is God's will for me to have healing. And, the word says that he'll turn everything for the better good for those who fear him. And, fear is not something that you're scared God's going to come hit you with like thunder and lightning bolts and kill you. And yes, the word does say that he will discipline those that he loves, but he does also say that he will never leave nor forsake you.
That's
And in my childhood, there were so many experiences that I didn't understand at the time, but I didn't come out of it. I came out of a home that believed in God, but there was no relationship. And I knew from a little girl that there would be this thing with God, and I never understood because there was nothing to explain it to me, and never knew why. And here I am today, sitting here, and I can actually tell my testimony. And as I said to Pastor Allan, I don't want to go into too much detail on a podcast in depth, because I didn't feel the release. But, I do come out of a past that there was abuse. I do come out of a past that I also have the privilege of having an older sister that she took a lot of heat for me, and she would take a lot of the abuse for me. And I don't know which one is worse, is for you to be abused or to have to sit and listen to someone being abused. And that's not something I don't really talk about. It's not, and guys, it's not that I'm embarrassed of my testimony, not at all. I just feel that it's intimate, and, so I've got a big sister, and she took a lot of heat for me. And there were many, many nights where I just sit and listen to either, listen to her taking the heat for me. And there was a lot of sexual abuse and stuff like that. And, but there were times that certain things had happened to me too. And I'm not broken because of that. I cry because I know that there are so many people out there that go through the same thing, and they think that there's no hope, and that there's never going to be an out, and you're never going to feel better. But the truth is that there is a hope, and there is a healing in God. And this is why I personally, as in Taryn, not a pastor, not trying to be a leader or anything in the Christian community, because to me, I still sometimes think that it's ludicrous that God would choose a person like me. Because, I'm not someone, I joke and I say I taught Allan everything he knows. The only thing I did right with Allan is that I believed in him more than he believed in himself, because I knew the minute I realized that I actually really love this person, I knew God's vision for him. And to me, I said, Lord, okay, I will die to anything in my own life to make sure that he gets to where he needs to be. And that sounds so cliche and corny, but it's really true. And I knew whatever, because there was never a competition. It was never a competition on me being more popular than him. It was okay for me to be, yes, I can be the loudest personality in the room, and I can be so much more, while my English is Englishing. I can be so loud, and I can make my personality out there. But my genuine wish and hope and dream was always for Allan to actually see fulfilled what God had for him. And whatever God used me for, it was okay. Little did I know that supporting him, my ministry would come out of that. I sit here and now I'm talking and squirreling off my testimony a little bit, but we kind of knew that would happen anyway. And obviously,
we knew this was going to happen.
If anybody really does know me, they know that I was so nervous. I had nothing to say. My mouth was dry. And Allan and I didn't sit and prepare what we were going to say. He got questions. I didn't even know he got questions from the people that put requests through. But I didn't prepare anything because it was just so that we could speak straight from the heart. And, my testimony comes from being a broken girl, an abandoned person, and someone that was extremely misunderstood. And to this day, I am someone that's still very, very misunderstood. But now I realize that that's exactly when God God makes you extraordinary. He doesn't make you ordinary.
That's right.
And as much as it caused a lot of rejection, and don't get me wrong, I still face rejection to this day. And I'm just surrounded by people that will pull me up and say, hey, that's not rejection, or hey, you're doing wrong. I always just say, when you put the like rejection on and you have rejection, it's like putting glasses that are purple on. And you see rejection everywhere you see. Everything's purple. But when you take those glasses off and God heals you, you only see, oh, that's just one part. Only that and that is, that little statue over there is actually purple. It's not the whole room. Not everything is rejection. But you can't see that unless you take those off and you allow God to heal you. And I always say that, like, I keep saying I always say, but whatever. When you want healing from God, it's like you get hurt and you walk into a room and you're bouncing around the walls and you always feel the pain from bouncing on the walls and stuff like that. But one day God comes and says, that's the door right there. You just need to walk through it. You make the choice for me or not. And, he'll always use people to come in the door that know the way out. And it's just incredible how God always gives you the opportunity over and over again to just be like, allow me to move. And in my testimony, God has brought so many people along my life to be able to allow me to move. And there's so many people that don't even know they were a part of that, but they really were. Yeah. And even, thinking about Allan's sister, how I always respected her because she's such, and I know Jenny probably wouldn't want recognition, or she wouldn't agree with it now or whatever, because that's the person she is that she did things in the secret place. Right. But her knees were rough with the prayers that she prayed for you. And I know that her knees were rough when we got together with the prayers that she prayed for us, and me too. But that's the kind of person she was. She is a warrior, and she was a warrior.
Let me just stop Taryn there. You know why she's saying that my sister's knees were rough? I sat in Spur in front of Taryn, and I didn't understand why I'm feeling about this girl. Obviously, I knew she was my wife, and I didn't know what God was doing. But if you want to talk about where my rejection started, it was this day. And I remember sitting in Spur, and I was now going to confess my undying love for Taryn. So we're sitting in Spur, and I'm like trying to connect what I'm feeling, because I'm also not really understanding what I'm feeling, but I know that I love this chick. And I sat in front of her and I said, no, I've got feelings for you. You maybe want to repeat what you said to me and what you did.
Okay, so I just want to say, a part of my testimony is that I wasn't someone that dated around or whatever. And yes, I did also party. And yes, I did meet him in Stones. No, I wasn't an alcoholic, but I did party hard. And I enjoyed it at the time. But I just knew for a long time that God was calling me. And because I didn't have anyone around me that had been a part of that life, I never understood this feeling. Every time, someone would speak about God, it was like this rush would come over my body. And I'm not saying that's like that for everybody. So, it takes more faith in just believing, and that pleases God more than you having a feeling and coming to God.
Yeah.
But I would know that God is calling me, and I knew. And then I got saved. So I had met Allan, and he had friends that we knew. And at the time, there was a bit of I won't say rivalry, but we didn't kind of see eye to eye, and then we became friends. And Allan actually didn't give me the time of day at the time. He would only talk to my friend. And I always, and then I went to church, and I obviously just came out of a relationship that was in the church, but it was extremely toxic, and truth in my heart that I knew that this wasn't the person for me. But because he was extremely popular, and he wasn't at the place he is now with God. I believe he is now with God. Unfortunately, behind the scenes, he was doing a lot, and it was just, there was so much power, and he was so called, but there was just that one time that he was just slipping up really bad. And unfortunately, that's where I entered his life, and I took the brunt end of a lot. And that damaged me a lot, because I had seen this person as so high. And I just want to give it a bit of outside perspective. So I was a bit damaged when this all happened. And you must understand that I had the privilege of having a boyfriend, ungodly relationship when I was in school. And I realize now that he was like a saving grace to me and his family. And actually, Allan knows his family, and he also thinks they're a great family. And I, to this day, I thank God for them, because they carried me through a really rough time, and especially because at that time I didn't see eye to eye with my mom and my dad. And it wasn't that I purposely went through that, but I realized that there was such a pain in me. And because at the time my sister had gone through so much more than me, we had always put all the effort into getting her healed. And I was the one that kept quiet, and I was just like, no, I'm fine. So we never got me help because I acted fine. And I never saw it from my parents' perspective, thinking, I just thought they just never cared enough to get me help. And but when God came into my life, God one day spoke to me and said to me, you got to, I realize I'm squirreling a little bit, but I'll get to it, is that you got to go and forgive your mom. And I was like, excuse me, I didn't do anything wrong. You have got it wrong here. And I knew that I'd heard God to go and forgive my mom. And I walked up to my mom and I said, Mommy, I'm so sorry that I blamed you for everything. I didn't see it. And it was just like word vomit. And I forgive you. And I'm sorry. I want you to forgive me, please. And, from that moment, God changed my life so much and changed my relationship with my mother so much that, she is the mother that you dream of always now. And I've had the privilege of being saved from just before I was 19, I believe. I'm 39 years old now. I know I look 22. And I've got the privilege of my mom still being at my side, and me being able to see her now through the eyes of what God would see her, and understanding that she's had an undying, unconditional love for me and done everything in her power, not even knowing Christ in a relationship at that time. She could undyingly lay her life down for her children. And I, today as a mom, understand that extreme love that she put out there. And it's one of the things that brings me closest to the understanding of what God's love is, that unconditional thing that never gives up on you, no matter how much you hurt God or turn to God and stuff like that. So then I had this breakup, and I decided that I needed to surround myself with Christians. I was still in part of the church, but I was so broken, and I needed friends. And I needed friends in the church because I still had friends in the world. And you see, to me, I wasn't like Allan. I didn't get saved and it was turn around. I was processed for like 2 years, still went out. I still drank. I smoked weed a few times. I'm not saying, I smoked weed like maybe, I don't know how many times, about 8 times in my life, maybe more.
You must know that I loved her when in her process, I still dropped her off at the places where she wanted to go and party and meet people to go and party with.
But it wasn't like I was meeting other guys. I was going to meet friends that I had in the world. And he had this, like, I wasn't like that my first year, but the second year I kind of, this is where it's just, going out and partying is lacquer. For the overseas people, that means great, it's fun. It was fun. It was amazing, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed smoking. I enjoyed drinking, but I knew God was calling me, so I got saved and got into a bad relationship. It was just toxic at the time, and it knocked me a little bit because I was such an immature Christian. And thank God that I was in a sound church that taught me surround yourself. It's important who you surround yourself with. So I decided that they just started a new youth at the church. It was about 3 months old. And I was like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to be a part of it because I see there's a lot of people my age. And I literally walked in the door and people greeted me. And as I walked in the door, Allan was walking out and we literally walked into each other. And I was like, I could not believe that this guy was here.
I first was still trying to figure out, where do I know you from?
Yes, because I said to you, hello, how are you? And you were like, fine. And you acting like all nice because now you must be the good Christian boy and welcome this newcomer. And I said, you don't remember me, do you? And he's like, no. And I said, I'm so-and-so's friend. Do you remember from Stones? And you went, oh. And he went like this, oh. I'll never forget it. And from that moment, he walked back into the youth, the hall we had youth in, and we sat and we spoke, and we actually never stopped hanging around each other. And then slowly but surely, he just fell madly in love with me.
Until she told me that she actually doesn't feel the same way about me.
No, that's not true. Okay, let me just explain. So knowing that I was coming into the youth broken, we did go to Spur, but something had happened before that. Is that I'm just going to go there. Is that Allan one day just asked me to pretend I was his girlfriend at a restaurant.
I remember.
In front of friends and stuff.
Up? That's embarrassing.
No, no, we're going to go there. And it was just for one particular person. And
yes,
at the time, I realized sitting there that I liked this attention from Allan. And it broke my heart because in my mind, I couldn't put this person I trusted and love in the same place. It just didn't make sense to me at all. And it broke me inside because I realized the person I trusted the most as a man, I actually was falling in love with. And it hurt me. And, it's so funny because it didn't make sense to me at the time. And I decided that I was going to tell. So we decided to go to Spur, and he speaks to me and I speak back. And I just want to tell you that it was never my heart to intentionally hurt him. I mean, we are married now, going on 15 years. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. So I just spoke back to Allan and I just said to him, look, I love you, but I can't be with you. My words were, as I trust you, and I realized that I'm falling in love with you, but I can't be with you. And his face went from...
and cried for a few days. Couldn't believe I was feeling the way I was feeling about this girl, and then she told me she doesn't
want to be with you.
Want to be with me.
But I just want to tell you, he never stopped. I may have broken his heart, and I didn't intentionally break his heart, but it's just, to me, it never made sense to love someone that you trust. And because my trust had been so broken in the previous relationship, although in my heart of hearts I knew it was wrong and it was just a toxic time for that person, I couldn't allow this. And I never understood a man being a constant, or even though I can't say the relationship I had in school was a bad one, it may have ended badly, but he wasn't a bad person. It was just someone I don't believe God had destined me to be with. He's now married, I don't know how many years, but from what I know, he's extremely happy with that person, and it never made sense to me. But, as much as I broke his heart, he never gave up, and he pursued in the manner of, he never left and he never stopped. And in the way he never stopped is that it wasn't like he came with roses, although Allan is pretty good. We're still buying me flowers, men out there, just so you know. He never stopped being there, and a constant and a piece in my life where I never had to look, I never had to feel abandoned. And it took me a long time to understand that he was not going to abandon me or not reject me. And even in our marriage, it was one of my biggest fights, that I was waiting for the day that he would just walk out or that he would just leave. And I think we were married for about 5 years. And I remember feeling like it was such a struggle for me at that moment. And I don't know why at that particular time, but I battled to understand that he's actually never left. And that was also something that God really, truly, with Allan's consistency in loving me, and loving me wasn't fulfilling any like romance or anything sexually, or like I'm saying in part of a marriage as well. Yeah, I said sex. Oh my goodness.
You said what? Yo,
okay, but he fulfilled a constant unconditional love, and the unconditional love never looked like the romance novels or the movies that we saw. It looked like a consistency, and a consistent being there, and requiring of me for the same. And because I had this undying loyalty to people that actually was almost to my detriment, and I just was like, God, after the previous relationship, I'm not going to date someone. You bring my husband, or that's it. And I'm not saying that that's how it works out for everybody, but this is how it worked out for me, and the privilege of it working out for me. Yeah. And so that was me going on a bit of a squirrel moment, just for Allan asking what I said back to him. But I think everyone's got a story on how they get together and where God has taken them from. That's almost, in 3 years, that'll be 20 years ago.
Sure, that's insane.
Yeah,
it's been
great.
Long.
I know. In 2007, we started dating or seeing each other. I don't know what it's called now. I'm not that to date with the times, because there's a difference with dating and seeing each other. And
we started dating in 2007.
We fell so madly in love with me. You're like,
So that covers a little bit of where Taryn and I come from and a little bit of our testimony. But I just want to get to the questions that I was actually asked on Instagram concerning our lives. So someone asked, what advice would you give to someone going through what you went through? And at the time, I never posted anything about our testimonies. So obviously today, those that are listening would have heard about our testimony. But what would you say is advice to give to someone that has gone through what you've gone through? And I mean, we can talk on aspects of, I mean, Taryn has gone through sexual abuse. I've gone through sexual abuse. We've gone through losing everything together. We've gone through rebuilding life together.
being misunderstood.
Being misunderstood.
Making mistakes.
Picking ourselves up. Like I said, losing everything, rebuilding everything, going through a miscarriage. What would you say, I think, as a one-liner? What would you say, not a one-liner, a question, an answer to this one-liner question?
No, there's a quick answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
What advice would you give someone that went through what we went through?
Is that when you've got God in your life, not trying to just always look for the miraculous. Now, put that aside. Is that when you have God in your life, there's an anchor to your soul because there's always hope for tomorrow. And, I want to say Pastor Allan the whole time, but Allan, I don't know if you mentioned in your previous podcast, but there's something that, your mentorship, the mentorship program you're going through now, Rita Springer spoke to you and said that, what do you want people to remember you by? And the thing I wanted people to remember me by, you asked me a question, I could rapidly tell you, I know exactly what people want. I want, because it's been my lifelong dream that when I could just give the hope of God to someone.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted people to know that tomorrow is going to be okay because God's already in it. And so this is what I want to say, that my biggest testimony and my best advice to you is that no matter what you go through, because I've gone through so much in my life, is that, and if you look at me, that you don't always see it because you always think that everything's just been okay, or that she's damaged and she's a sensitive person. Yes, I'm a sensitive person, but I'm a warrior. And what makes me a warrior and a survivor and victorious through Christ is because I have believed in him. And it wasn't because I was soft on the outside, it's because I was strong on the inside and God had made me strong. So my advice to you is that you have enough strength to take one more step. And if you can just take one more step and believe in him, he will take you the rest of the way. And once you've taken that one more step, find the courage to just take one more step again. It's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get up. But if you can get up in the name of Christ and the grace and mercies, because his grace and his mercies are new every single day, you've got a new opportunity every time you wake up. And you will mess up. I think I've messed up more as a Christian and even more as a pastor. And it wasn't look like smoking and drinking or cheating on my husband or I don't know what else to say, but it looked like unbelief. And unbelief is a bigger sin than faith, than going out and drinking. And so if you can just choose, even though your feelings are a certain way, if you can just choose to believe that it's going to be okay and that God can and he will sort everything out, because there's so much, the whole word is full of that. The whole word is full of don't be dismayed or discouraged. I'm going ahead of you. Don't fear. I have not given you a spirit of fear. I'm there with you. I will never leave nor forsake you. The whole word is full of that. And every story brings you back to the grace that he has got for you, that his grace is sufficient for you, so that it doesn't matter how far you are from him. His promise is that he'll never leave nor forsake you. So all you have to do is turn to him and seek him first.
Sure. I think for me, is advice to give to you, considering or taking the aspects of what Taryn and I have gone through in life, or even our testimony, I would say is consistency and to get up every single time. I think without me getting emotional, you have to find, even if it's a little bit, that voice of hope and that voice of faith in you that says, just get up one more time. You've lost everything, but get up. You're going to build up again. You've sinned, get up, move forward. You've done whatever it's been. You're going through a season, you're going through a valley that you feel like you only going through valleys and you never see the mountaintop. Choose to get up and believe that God's got better for you. When we miscarried, I think that was something that Taryn and I actually haven't really spoken in depth, even like with regards to when we miscarried, because it's something that happened and we just decided God's promised us certain things. We've seen our children in the future. So we're going to believe that Brian is in the future, which Brian did come 2 or 3 years later. But I think for me, I would say it's consistency. If it's one thing that I heard from a pastor say to us in our first church, the only thing that kept him in his 40 years of walking with God, or 50 years walking with God, is consistency, being consistent and never giving up. And he would say, never give up, never give up, never give up, never give up. And I think that's key. I also want to say is that for me as an Allan, I've learned to believe God in the most odd moments, or the most dark moments, if that makes sense. Is I would always say to Taryn, I'm going to leave it. This is in God's hands. Yeah. Whatever happens, miscarry, lose everything, sleeping on the side of my mom's house, to just not knowing what's next. And I would find a place in me with my relationship with God to go, God, I'm going to trust you one more time. I'm going to trust you to believe that you're going to sort this out. And later on in life, when I look back, I'm going to see your faithfulness and I'm going to testify about it one day.
Yes.
And to think about that, sometimes you only know how far God has brought you is when you actually look back on what he's brought you from and testify about that. Right. Even sitting here today, we can look back and say that's true. We can look back and say God brought us out of poverty. God brought us out of a certain whatever aspect or thing in our lives that we have had to overcome. We can sit here today and tell you that God really brings you through everything that you go through. And even when you don't see it at that moment that you're in, he does bring you through it.
The one thing you said just now is that God doesn't require you to be a certain person or a certain way for you to come to him. He only wants you to come and trust and try. God says, seek ye first. And if you look at that seek, it means to try, to find. And I realized, especially in the last couple of years, that God never required me to pray 50 hours or do or know the word in the Greek and the Hebrew and the meaning of this and that. But he only required me to try. And the more I tried, the more I wanted, the more I believed. And obviously we've slipped up, and we as people, we lost sight of things. And sometimes just to remember your first love and to find him as your first love. To first find him as your first love, and then to keep your eyes on him. Yeah. The best advice is to look up. Keep your eyes on him. You look in, and that's to deal with the things in your heart. And if you don't know how to deal with them, find someone that does. It's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to go to someone. And that was something that I struggled, because I always felt like I need to have sorted it out myself. Even, as a pastor or someone as a leader, it never ever made sense to me that God wanted to use me as a leader. But the one thing that did make sense to me is I just wanted people to feel that everything's going to be okay. So, to be consistent, but also just remember that for relationship with him, when you've got relationship with him, it requires you wanting to spend time with him. And that's in your word, in worship, and to pray and to be in his presence, to be still in his presence. It's important, because that gives you strength to know, strength is found in finding a peace in the situation. And peace is a verb. It's a doing. It's a believing. It's a stepping out and doing. And it's a doing in the sense of you decide to trust God, even when you just feel like you can't. You make a decision and you do.
I saw on one of the posts, it was fear-testimony. And I'm just going based on what I feel. With regards to my testimony, if it's something that I feared, can I just tell you today that me sitting here speaking was something that is a part of my testimony today that I can say I never wanted to do. People laugh at me and they say, but you can worship, you can lead worship, and you can sing in front of thousands of people. But you say that you are fearful to talk. And it is something that I actually had to overcome. I was very fearful of speaking in front of people. If you knew me before I got saved, or even in school, it was something that I hated. I would actually just be quiet. Yes, I'd be the person that'd be going to parties and getting drunk. But I mean, we all know that alcohol and drugs gives you a personality that's actually not you.
Mm-hmm.
And fear of speaking in front of people was something that is actually today a part of my testimony. And the fact that I can sit here today and have a conversation with, even though it's my wife, even with someone in general, it's a testimony today. Because if you knew me back then, I would think I'm going to get mocked for the way I speak. I would always think I sound like a retard when I talk. And it was something that God actually brought me through. And the other thing I want to say about that is that the very thing that you fear or that you're scared of and you feel that you're inadequate to do is sometimes a thing that God actually calls you to do, because he displays his strength in your weaknesses.
I mean, I know most people that see me now would never believe it. But for me to be able to get up and actually have something to say is actually crazy.
I was about to say, you definitely don't struggle with that.
No, but I mean, like going up and actually having something that impacts someone.
Yeah.
And and actually being able to encourage people with things that are actually sound and valid. But it just shows you that it doesn't matter who you are or if you're particularly that talented. If you're willing, God will. And that is what's so awesome, is that it's also not seeing God only using you when you've got a mic or when you're significant. To me, God was using me more behind the scenes, and that was important to me. It's still important to me. No one will ever see how much I pour into people and who I pour into. And I mean, it's not important though. What's important is that if I say to God, I want to be used to create hope in other people, it's to go out and try. It's like when I look at it now, I don't want to sound like I'm self-deprecating the whole time, or I'm putting myself down, or that I don't believe in myself. It's not that. It's that I know that God can use anybody if he can use me.
Sure, that's powerful. And that's actually the heart Taryn and I have always had, being involved in ministry the last 18 years. I mean, we started serving in ministry when we were 19 years
21.
old, 18, 19, 20, 21.
Well, I was used before that.
I think
but
I was 19. I think it was 2006. I was 19 years old. You were 20, 21. You're 2 years older than me. I keep forgetting that. And I think...
because I look 5 years younger.
Amen. I think for us, that has been something that we've always wanted to make sure people know. And this is why we have conversations like this, is even with the perfectness of this podcast, I don't want to just fix and edit a lot of stuff, because I want it to be real. The thing that we've had and we've held high for our whole walk with Christ is that we want people to see that we're not a mess, but we're constant work. I don't think we ever get to a place where we are perfect.
No.
Our senior pastor, Prophet Leon Dupree of Encounter Church, he says the same thing. He doesn't want people to think that he's perfect. We all fall short of the glory of God every single day. We all make mistakes. And
he just found God and he ran with God,
And I think that's the thing I respect about him as well a lot, is because there's never an act of perfectness. And that's something that's been very real for Taryn and I. We want people to see that, not that we fall, but we want people to see that we're not perfect. And I think in that it gives people hope, even with us in ministry, even with us, not that there's a huge spotlight or platform that we have ministering all over the world on worship, for me, example, or Taryn preaching on stages all over the world.
I'm joking, that's a joke.
But what we're saying is that it's been important for us to let people realize that you're human, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to say stupid things, you're going to swear, you're going to get angry, you're going to sometimes show things that not are a typical example of the fruits of the Spirit, but it's because you're not perfect and you're human. And I think that with the people that we've walked the road with for however long and however many years, and people that we've known over the years, that's encouraged them, not encourage them to sin, but encourage them to know that God can use them with their flaws, with everything that's wrong with them. And that in that, it encourages them and pursues them to seek Christ more and live a righteous life.
And you know what's so funny is that like we forget that when we sin and or whatever sin looks like to you, and I'm not trying to make sin something now, but we forget that God knew. He already knew that you were going to sin like that. And his son already died for you so that you could find him. And it's already sorted. But he already knew you. He formed you in your mother's womb. He knew who you were before the foundations of the earth. He knew you. And that meant he knew every mistake, everything you were going to do wrong, your failures, the thorn in your side, what you would do, how you would let him down, whatever, okay? He knew that already, and yet he chooses you.
That blows me away about the Lord. Even with all our shortcomings, he still chooses to use us.
100%. And then he does, despite our shortcomings.
Okay, so we have another question. What is the most important lesson you and Allan have learned through your walk with Christ? So for me, I would want to say Matthew 6, verse 33, keeping him first. We've seen that in our lives personally. We've seen by keeping him the focus and keeping him first, how he works everything out for our good and how he gives us our heart's desires as well. Someone once said to me that when you keep God your concern, he takes charge concerning your concerns. And it's something that I think personally I've seen in my whole walk with God, is that when things didn't make sense to me, I would say, even in this, Lord, I'm going to still continue serving. I'm going to still continue worshiping. I'm going to still continue going to church. And I think in that process, I saw how God sorted everything out. And even in a ministry perspective when I want to speak about worship, pouring from that place of intimacy and relationship with God is the thing that is important, because you can never pour out to people that you don't have inside of you. I know I said this on my previous podcast with Verona. Everything is birthed from intimacy with God. Everything is birthed from the secret place. You know, we heard a sermon yesterday that Prophet Leon said, the secret is the secret place. And I think that's something that I've learned over the last 18 years.
Sure. I've got about 14.6 answers to this. And it's very hard for me to put it down to one thing, because there's many, many lessons that I've learned. And there's many life-changing things that God has taught me. But I think one of the biggest things is, other than answering the same as you, saying, you know, it doesn't matter as long as your eyes are on him, it's okay. I think there's a few little things, like to try, to just keep on trying, and you'll soon succeed. You know, trying is actively doing something in faith, surrounding yourself with people that know better. But the biggest lesson that I can think of that comes up in my spirit right now is that you don't have to fit in the box of what someone else has for you.
That's powerful.
You just need to go to God about and he will do everything in you. It may not fit in other people's box, but he will use you to fill the tank of someone else's. And what I mean by that is that I once heard a sermon at one of our women's conference that, it doesn't matter if you stick out or you feel different, and that's despondent, and it was so funny because that's always something, is I always felt like I was the different one. I'm the one that sticks out like a sore thumb. And now I've learned to embrace that, because out of that is where your anointing lies. And anointing doesn't always look like you come in and you got this massive, amazing sermon, or maybe this is a good podcast and people are spoken to about it. It doesn't matter. It matters about that one individual that you can look at and try, and the change you can make, and growing God's kingdom. And that matters more than that. But you get the opportunity to stand on the stage and maybe sing, and you get the opportunity to maybe preach a sermon. You get the opportunity to that. And when you in the place of life that God uses you the most, you realize that's so little of your relationship with God. So never fit into a box of what people think you need to be.
It's very
You
powerful.
just need to fit into what God has made you to be.
Mm.
And the only way you can find that out is by relationship.
I think adding to that, one of the most powerful things I also heard Jeremy Riddle, a worship leader, say in America, he said, you are most anointed when you are most yourself.
Sure, that's powerful. That's good.
And it ties in with what you're saying. I think something that Taryn and I have also learned in this walk with the Lord is that comparison will kill
Yeah.
the very thing that God is doing in your life, because you will always think that God's not doing enough in your life because of what is happening in someone else's life. And I'm probably going off the topic now, but you don't realize, and I'm saying this because people sometimes look at Taryn and I in certain aspects of this. You might see what God is doing in someone else's life, but you don't know the shoes that they've had to walk in that process. You don't know what they've had to go through in that process to get where they are today. So I've made it my thing in me to say that even if I look at someone and it looks like they're more blessed, more anointed, because face it, there's always going to be someone more anointed than
100%,
you. There's always going to be someone better than you. There's always going to be someone that looks like they're doing more than you. But focus on what God has called you to do.
Yes.
God has wired you the way you are wired because he wants to use you the way you are. And it's something that gave me peace because I realized, hey, God uses me the way I am. He uses me the way I sing, the way Taryn speaks, the way I speak.
The way I sing.
The way you sing.
That's a lot.
And that's okay. And be okay with that. Be okay with what God is doing in someone else's life. Don't let it affect your life. Something that was very powerful for me in 2015 is I went to a meeting. I had to lead worship for a bunch of ministers. And it was a meeting that was being had for some leadership conference. And I remember going, and I didn't understand why I'm going. I was like, Lord, I said yes to this pastor to lead worship for him. There were like 50 people. And it was people that were, obviously, I don't want to mention names. And they were all there. And I remember at the end of this session, they were giving me word. And in one of the prophetic words that the Lord was speaking to someone for me, they said, you are sitting at a table and you're seeing everyone being served a dish. And everyone's getting their food before you. And you're asking God, why is everyone being served their food before you when you've been waiting here longer than what the other people have just been seated or placed? And in this prophetic word, the Lord said to me, it's because you've asked for such an exquisite dish that it takes time to prepare the specific meal. And we sometimes forget that. We forget that you need to go through certain things that you just need to accept, whether it's hurt. I mean, Prophet Leon speaks a lot about persecution and betrayal from people and going through hardships of life. Where we might not have the answers for you. We might not be able to tell you you're going through X, Y, and Z because of A, B, and C. It's just part of your process. And in that process, God strengthens you to be able to run and carry that call of God that he has over your life. You need to go through certain things. You can't be trusted with larger territory if you're not faithful in smaller territory. You can't be trusted with more if you're not faithful with the little that you have in your hands now. And I think that's something that we've seen over the years as well.
Definitely. You know, there's the Great Commission that God expects of you. And it doesn't take rocket science, anointing, or anything like that. It takes faith to just go out there and fulfill the Great Commission. And, you know, start with that. And never let go of that. No matter where God takes you. Never let go of doing that for God, because that is, you know, that's what he wants from us. And when you can keep the little things that you see as little in your walk with God, you'll see that your tank will always be full, and that you won't go from an empty place. And the more you do those little things, the more you'll want to. And God will take you, because taking the small and trusting you with the small, it doesn't, you know, for everybody that looks like something different. And for me, it was maybe serving in the background, scrubbing toilets. And now to this day, it's the thing that I take more joy in, because I realize that not everyone is going to take a mic. Not everyone's going to be this. But, you know, some people come to church to be a door greeter. And you greeting people coming into the church is such a ministry that you don't realize. I mean, I think it's prophetess Anne. I think it's Anne. You know, in the Bible, she was a welcomer. She was a door greeter. She went with people, and yet that was so significant. It was mentioned in the Bible. And so this is what I want to say, is that never take anything that you're doing for God for granted and like it's not significant to God, because it is. Everything's significant. And, you know, you've got to just carry on in doing, and you will fall and you'll mess up. And sometimes speaking as Taryn now, I've got to dark places. I was at a dark place and I was too scared to reach out because I'd become a leader and I didn't know where to look, and I was now failing, and I had this problem with failing, and I never really even told people beyond saying this right now. And I worried so much more, not more about what the leadership was thinking of me, but that I was failing God's people because I wasn't feeling strong enough right now. When there's nothing wrong with going, hey, I just need to take a moment and say, I need to be still before God and just find that thing again. And I found him again in doing the small. Find that thing in sharing his love, going out there, telling people about God, you know, making this thing work, the vision work. Because you helping the vision work might not look like your name is out there, but it's a part of something that's so powerful. It doesn't mean God doesn't know your name.
So that's powerful. I actually want to add to that. I want people to understand that are watching today, visibility doesn't determine value.
Oh, that's good.
Because there are people behind scenes that carry your church service, that carry your ministry wherever you're serving. You might be someone that is watching today that puts lights on in the church, that locks and opens a church, that puts the power on. But do you realize that without you doing that, nothing that needs to happen in a service can happen, which means what God wants to do in a service can't happen, because if you weren't there, the power wouldn't be on, the lights wouldn't be on, the stage wouldn't be on. I think that's the common misconception people have when it comes to serving, because just because there's a spotlight on you doesn't mean that you're not valued. And it's something that I think is important that people need to understand, that serve wherever you serve, is that you are valued. God does see you.
That's right.
And it's something that I've lived by, and Taryn and I have lived by, is always remember, there might not be eyes on you that are by humans, but there's eyes that never shut that are always on you, and that's the Lord.
They never slumber.
And he sees every single sacrifice. He sees everything that you do.
It's 100% true. It's very powerful. I mean, I could sit here and roll out names of people that just feel they do small things for me, you know, and I actually sat there the other day and I thought, God, what makes me emotional? Why would you give me the honor and privilege of people wanting to do things for me? And it wasn't because I thought, oh, I'm not doing anything, but I just thought, God, I never want to overlook that privilege of people seeing what God has placed in me, and them, it might just be handing me a water, or it might be you doing something so small, like picking up my kids. But there's an honor in people doing that for you that should never go lost. And a lot of people think that their value goes lost in doing things that are small and degrading, but it's not. When you can look at someone else and serve the vision that God has given them, God can trust you with a vision of your own. And it's not to say that you must be abused and stay there and be like a cultish witchcraft that you should be, but maybe you are born to be someone's PA. And you think that's, I haven't got a big calling. That's a huge calling. Imagine being a person that God has chosen to make someone else's life easier so that they can preach or they can do the work of God on the outside. It doesn't mean you're not doing the work of God. It means you are alleviating someone of the pressure. And to me, that is taking the kingdom further.
Yeah.
So never underestimate what God has got for you and the small things, because it's the small thing that make the engine run.
So in ending, we have one last question. Someone asked, why do you do what you do? And I just want to say, it's ultimately because we love people
Mhm.
and we want to see the fulfillment of God's promises and call on their lives as well to come to fruition. People will disappoint you. People will betray you. And you're not in control of that. But if I have to think of the actual denominator of why we do we do what we do, I would say it's that. It's always been because we love people and to see the Great Commission fulfilled and to see people step into what God has called them as well, called them into. People think that just because we're on a platform or I'm singing every weekend and I release music and stuff like that, that it's all about me. But if people really do know me, you know, it's been my passion and my desire to see younger worship leaders and people step into what God has called them and to see them in the fullness of that capacity of a worship leader that they can step into. With the people that we've been entrusted to pastor at Encounter Church that's under us, it would be that specific thing too, is that we love people and we want to see people and to step into everything that God has called them.
Yeah. No, I'm joking. I think that's the very thing. There's nothing more fulfilling in me. And then looking back at someone that couldn't speak or couldn't do or was hopeless or suicidal, and it's never even been a thing of seeing them up front, but looking from a distance and to see them thriving. In my heart, that there's nothing better than that. Nothing. And for them to be helping someone else thrive, that makes my heart go squishy.
I'll never forget we had auditions, the recent auditions at our church's worship team auditions. And I'll never forget a lady named Charlotte. She might be shocked that I'm mentioning her name now. She sang Break Every Chain by Tasha Cobbs at the auditions. And it was at a moment, I'll joke with people and I say, I'll always liken the people that are in our teams to worship leaders or singers that are currently there. And I remember sitting and she was singing, "There is power in the name of Jesus." But the minute she started singing, I think I got up and I made everyone laugh. I almost threw my microphone at her because I think you were there. I said, "Lord, this is a Tasha Cobbs that I've found for Encounter Church." And I just remember there and then being reminded of this is why we do what we do. Is I could see the end picture and see this lady is going to lead worship and she is going to be crazy.
So
she might
sweet.
not see it right now, but there's a very huge future for her.
And what a broken girl that came in that you've seen such significant change in already. And it's got nothing to do with us. It's not like we were her leaders. It's just someone that we can once again look at and in such a short span of time see what God has done in her and then be able to see what God is going to do through her in the end game.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, my beautiful wife, Taryn.
I'm joking.
It was an awesome conversation.
I feel like I've got so much more to say.
And we definitely, I know you do, trust me, I live with you. So we will definitely have another podcast very, very soon.
I was like, I'm never doing this again. I don't know what to say. And now I've got so much more to say.
But I just want to thank you for joining today. Thank you for supporting this podcast. I just want to ask again that you click the notifications bell, that you subscribe, and just let us know what you thought of today's podcast. We'll see you soon.